Alright everybody, diecastmania here, and welcome back to another review. Today we have the Replicars 1/50th scale Hitachi ZX135US-7 reduced tail swing hydraulic excavator. This model was recently released following the ZX 225 model in April of 2023, and this is the third reduced tail swing model Replicars has released to date this year. So here it is in the standard Hitachi branded box from Replicars. On the top it has the model number ZX-7 series, pretty standard, similar to what we've seen on the 200 and 225 models. So on the back it's fairly plain. We just have the dimensions of the machine as well as some other information like the operating weight and the horsepower, and then we have the diagram showing the range of motion on the machine as well as dimensions. Once again, here's the rest of the packaging, the -7 series artwork, and on the bottom we can see it says manufactured by Replicars Corporation and the full licensing information. Alrighty, now let's get this model out of the box. So the model is contained within the standard styrofoam tray and the plastic clear top, and the model itself is not actually secured by any ties or anything. It comes right out of the box, and per standard by Replicars, the mirrors are on their old molded sprue. So with a pair of hobby nippers or something similar, you can clip them off and attach them to the model following the instruction sheet. So here we have the ZX135US-7 out of the box and with the mirrors attached. The mirrors attach just like any other Replicars model and are a clip-on fit, though if you plan on moving this model around quite a bit, a drop of glue couldn't hurt. So here's an overall first look at the model. It is built to the same standards of detail and quality as the ZX 225, if you're familiar with that model. And being a Replicars model, it is a pretty good looking piece with some nice functionality and detail. So starting off this review, we're going to go with the range of motion and the functionality. All these cylinders are very smooth and have a pretty decent range. The model is posable in all sorts of positions. And now we're going to demonstrate the transport configuration. So we're going to go ahead and swing the model 180 degrees, have the blade at the rear, allowing the boom to be tucked nice and low. We'll go ahead and get this on a trailer and see how that looks. So here we have the first gear tag trailer, or beaver tail, and the 135 on the trailer, and it fits quite nicely. So moving on to the working ranges of the model, you can see the boom, stick, and bucket stretch out nice and far, and they have a very nice upward reach. And a part of that whole reduced tail swing concept is that this machine is supposed to be as compact as possible for working in congested areas. So really, to help this situation, the rear counterweight and the front of the machine just barely expand over the footprint of it. So moving right along onto the digging depth of this model, we can see it has a very respectable digging depth. With that said, you can pretty much confidently say this model will hold any position you'd like it to be put in, and it looks great doing so. And here we have a photo of the model loading a truck. With all that covered, let's go ahead into the rest of the functionality. So here we have the undercarriage on the 135. So when compared to the larger sibling, the 225, it gains this blade on the front, which is really used for backfill, extra stability, and tasks incidental to the work that the 135 would be doing on the site. So this is a predominantly plastic piece with actual cylinders to raise it up and down, though they're not quite strong enough to say raise the machine off the ground. But you can see it has a pretty good range of motion. It raises far enough to allow for some clearance on the front. Alright, so now for those of you curious about how the blade is actually attached to the model, we'll go ahead and look underneath. And it appears that the actual mounts that the blade attaches to are part of the undercarriage assembly. So there's some considerable modification required to completely remove that blade from the undercarriage. Moving on to the tracks of the model, they are these standard linked metal tracks. They do have an actual tensioner and they roll pretty decently by hand, though on a relatively smooth surface, they require quite a bit of effort to even get them to remotely turn. But these tracks, they look pretty decent. They aren't too wide and they aren't too narrow, but I think they fit the model pretty nicely. The only thing that maybe could have complemented this model would have been the option for those bolt-on pads for street work. Alright, so moving on to the detail on the ZX135, you have the new -7 series cab. You have Hitachi on the seat, you have all your controls and everything painted and highlighted pretty decently. It's just about everything you'd expect from a modern excavator model. You have very nice casting work as well as painting and decaling. ZX135 on the side, I actually just recently noticed that on the 225 and the 135, the model number decal is actually an adhesive or a water slide. At just the right angle, you can catch that there's a very, very faint rectangular outline, but from a distance, you just really can't tell. I don't know if that was for future planning, if they're going to release other global versions of this machine or the models. And typical with Replicars, the paint and decal work on this model is excellent, and it's just done to a very high standard. On the top, you have the exhaust, you have the camera, side mount camera, you have the opening engine compartment up here, anti-slip texturing. Handrails on this model are all plastic except for the cab side one right here, which is a metal. These ones are plastic. They're not overly sized and they're painted so they look decent. The hydraulic lines on this model here are pretty decently detailed, just like on the 225 with the actual silver pieces for the connections between the hard and soft lines. The hydraulic lines on the boom and stick, just like the 225, are rather simplistic and leave a bit to be desired. We know Replicars is capable of much better, as they've done on the Hitachi 200 and their link belt models, with the actual coil wraps on the soft lines and the separate pieces that they used for the hard lines on the boom. Again, here's just a quick look at the lines on both the 225 and the 135. They leave a little bit to be desired, but they do the job. In terms of overall fit and finish, there really is no issue on this model. Any of the plastic parts were painted to match. Now, being a Japanese domestic market model, the Hitachi logo is only on the left side of the boom. There are the auxiliary hydraulic lines casted into the stick. Now, the bucket is overall pretty generic, but it attaches via screws, so if that's not something you like, you could very easily remove and replace it with aftermarket attachments. And this is definitely not the first scale model in this size class, so there's a lot of aftermarket attachments out there that you can use. Now, the model itself is overall a very nice piece. Again, very nice paint and decal work. It looks pretty nice, and I think it ranks very respectably among the other 13.5, 15-ton reduced tail swing excavator models out there. There are quite a few options these days. You have the Kobelcos, the 140s, the 160s, the Komatsu PC138, you have the Linkbelt 145, the Cat 315. The 135 is just a very solid option. It does lack a little in the hydraulic lines compared to the others, but in all other aspects, I think it is very respectable, and I really do like the way this model looks, and would highly recommend it. So with all that being said, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you all in the next video.